Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Akiona Law Podcast. I am collaborative divorce attorney, mediator, family law lawyer, Ululani Akiona. And in this podcast, we talk about anything and everything that intersects in the areas of family law and divorce. And today, I have with me collaborative divorce attorney and mediator, Gwen Mathewson. So Gwen practices in King and Jefferson counties here in Washington. She is a past president of King County Collaborative Law. She is a member of Collaborative Professionals of Washington. She is also a member of the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, and she recently completed a year-long leadership academy with the IACP, International Academy Collaborative Professionals. And she helped develop for King County Collaborative Law an access to collaborative program to help people be able to find affordable services in collaborative law. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so excited to have you here and talk about collaborative divorce and mediation. So let's just get right into it.
Sure.
What is a collaborative divorce?
Collaborative divorce is a process in which the parties are agreeing to stay out of court primarily. And we enter into a contract that ensures that everybody is going to stick to that agreement to work together cooperatively and creatively to try to come up with solutions that work for their family. We usually do it in professional teams. So we've got an attorney for each client, a financial professional, and a coach who's somebody who has a mental health professional background, and they come to help. What's the right verb? They come to help with the incredible emotional content that is always available, always present in a divorce. And they do a lot of team facilitation, and help with creating parenting plans. They give some very pragmatic coaching to couples who are transitioning from a one household family to a two household family, particularly when they have children and they need to keep working together as parents in the future. Some very good parenting planning is a really important part of the divorce, and the coach is very instrumental in helping that happen.
I like to think, Gwen, in a way of the coach being the party's emotional translator. So if you're in a meeting with the team and the coach is there, and the wife, in a way, is saying, "Gosh, he's such an asshole. He has to control. He's always controlling my spending." And then the coach will kind of step in and be like, "Well, what your wife is trying to say is that she's really frustrated because she feels as if she can't make independent decisions about the finances without your approval."
Yeah, that's certainly some of it. And that
Yeah.
can happen in full team meetings, because in collaborative cases, we usually are meeting together. So we'll have 4 people, 5 people, 6 people in a meeting, whether in person or on Zoom. So all of us on the professional team are trying to help reframe those strong emotions so that they're better understood by the other spouse. And then there's also this additional piece that where things are very challenging, the coach can also understand it differently often than attorneys do, right? We don't have that same training, and can help the team do some brainstorming around how do we help? How do we help support folks so that they can really show up in this conversation, even given this very complicated emotional context? So that the coach is working with the divorcing couple or separating couple, and they're also helping with team facilitation, working with the professional team as we do some brainstorming together without the clients present about how we can best support this family to move really efficiently and effectively through this difficult process.
And I want to back up a little bit to talk about in terms of how long have you been doing collaborative divorces?
I first started in about 2008. I was trained in 2007, which was right after I opened my own solo family law practice.
Okay.
The training to do collaborative divorces includes a 3-day basic training and then mediation training of another 5 days. So I completed those pieces and then started taking cases in 2008. And then most of us who do this work are training all the time. There's so much to learn about helping people through conflict.
Right.
And so that was just the beginning. But I started taking cases at the very beginning of 2008.
So what drew you to this collaborative divorce process?
It's I believe that for those families who can do it, which is not everybody, but for those who can, it meets a real need. There are lots of families that need to transition out of a marriage and into two homes, but they still have a basic amount of empathy and respect for one another, or they have
Yeah.
kids together and they need to stay on the same page. They don't want to litigate.
Yeah.
There's a huge market for people who just don't want to litigate. They want to get through this as smoothly as they can with as much dignity and grace as possible. But it's complicated. So they need help in doing that. They don't know what the answers are to all of their questions, but they do know that they don't want to slug it out in court. And so they're really not interested often in hearing, what am I entitled to? What can I get? How can I get the most out of this? I want the most time with my children as I can. They're not approaching it with that sort of adversarial mindset. And so keeping them out of a system that in some ways encourages people to think in those terms
Right.
is generally a good thing if they are willing to commit to really trying to work together, to compromise, to empathize, um, and to think creatively as much as they can about what's going to work in the long term for their families, so that any agreements that they make in this process are durable ones. And they're not rethinking it. They're at peace with their settlement and their agreements going forward. Um,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who want that. It's just they don't
Yeah.
know how to get it. They don't know how to go through this with a lot of dignity and grace and generosity, while at the same time protecting their own interests and having their fears and their deep concerns addressed. So anyway, there are a lot of people who want it. Um, I I enjoy providing that kind of service. I think it's in the best interest of children. And that's a big motivator for me. This is about helping to protect the next generation and making sure
Uh,
that they can thrive.
yeah.
Because kids get scarred in their parents' divorces when there's high conflict. So, to the extent that we professionals can help people manage that conflict, get out of conflict by understanding more deeply what they need and what their co-parent needs, then we're doing a service to kids, and that's very meaningful to me. And so that's largely why I do it. It's also just a very nice way to work, and it fits me and my personality and my values a little better than a traditional litigation model. A lot better, actually.
Mhm. In terms of, what I'm hearing in terms of what's people have, people trying to decide, is collaborative divorce a good fit for me? I heard you mention, it's a process to allow people to treat each other with respect
Right.
and empathy, be creative in trying
Hmm.
to fashion their own solutions, how to navigate this process,
Yep.
but also durable agreements. Because I don't know about you, but in my divorce litigation practice, I've seen it where people reach agreements out of mediation,
Yeah.
and the mediation process in your regular divorce, your litigation divorce, it's more of a muscle mediation where you've got the
Right.
mediator
Right.
applying that pressure under the threat. If you guys don't come to agreement, you're going to go to trial. You're going
Right.
to go to court, and the court's going to decide for
Right.
you. So these people are doing mediation typically 10 hours.
Yeah.
And they're fashioning these agreements out of duress. And then 6 months, a year later,
Sure.
that doesn't work for me.
Right?
It's not
Sometimes the next
doable.
morning they wake up and they say, well, what did I
Yeah,
agree to? I was
yeah,
really tired at the end of the day and
yeah,
I was told I needed to sign this thing. So yeah, those marathon sessions that
yeah,
people often do, which is called mediation often, but really is something different. I think of those as settlement conferences where, again, you've got a neutral party who's going in
right,
between separate rooms often, trying to broker a deal, simply because people don't want to go to trial. And so
yeah,
they are done under a lot of pressure often. And, they're not collaborative in nature. It really is about, trying to get out of this without incurring more expense and the anguish of going to trial. So that is a very different kind of process than other forms of mediation, which we can talk about in a minute. But
yeah,
but it is essentially a evaluative process that's about, well, what would happen if this got in front of a judge? What are my risks? How do I cut my losses?
mhm,
Um, which is a very different sort of question for people to be asking than what's going to help our family thrive.
oh,
Um, so
right,
it's just a really different a different inquiry and a different approach to trying to reach some sort of settlement. And yes, to your point, it is a muscle mediation in that people are being pressed to
rest,
agree to something, just so that they can go home and go to bed. And and they might not feel good about it later. And so one of the things that I really like about collaborative practice is that we don't ever put somebody in that kind of a pressure cooker. Everybody gets to think, and really reflect and analyze and decide whether, okay, yeah, this is a good way to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I'm going to feel comfortable about this in the future. And if I don't love it, at least I know why this was our solution, because we have really vetted all of the other options, and
right,
this is the one that's the best, imperfect as it might be. And I think that leads to a different degree of um, peace, really, just an ability to say, okay, we're done with that now. I'm okay with it. And I can move on in my life. I can do my own healing
yeah,
from this difficult thing I've just been through. And I'm not still full of the anger and resentment. And I'm
yeah.
never going to have to revisit these agreements. We're not going to be disagreeing about it in the future because we know why we're here and we've done the best we can.
Yeah, because that when you reach an agreement that you felt in a way pressure to get into because you're just tired, whatever, you just want to be over and
Right.
done with, that bitterness and the resentment and the anger, that's a lot for people to carry and they
It
don't get to
is. It
heal.
leads to a
Yeah,
lot of second guessing. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? You know, damn it, he pushed me to make this decision or whatever
right.
it might be. And so if you relieve people of that burden of all of that emotional uncertainty and resentment, um, they the air is clear and they can get on and heal and step into the next chapter of their lives, much less burdened.
And that's what I like about the collaborative divorce process because it truly is. It's like the magic of the process is that it really is transformative as much as it can be, but in a positive way,
Yeah, in in
positive
in
and
the
healthy
best
way.
circumstances, it really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
It isn't always. I mean, you
right.
still get people who are frustrated at the end. They've made decisions that they wish they didn't have to make. But again, I think going through the collaborative process and reaching those, less than fabulous results, is a whole lot better than having those less than fabulous results forced on you.
Right.
And again, there's context, there's perspective, there's an understanding about why something needs to be that way. For example, there's not always enough resources to go around.
Yeah.
So sometimes people leave a divorce feeling stretched financially. But again, if they've had a chance to analyze the whole picture from both sides and thinking about their kids, um, they might understand, okay, this is this is what I have, and I'm going to figure out how to work with it, as opposed to resenting somebody else for putting them in that difficult financial position.
Right. Right. And we talked about, and I just have to put a disclaimer, I did not come up with the term muscle mediation. That came from Jacinta Gallant, who Gwen and I just recently did a continuing education introduction into insight mediation, which is this fabulous program that Gwen has received training as an insight mediator.
Mhm.
That's Jacinta coined that term, muscle
Yeah.
mediation. And yeah.
Or we certainly heard her use it last week. Whether she coined it, I don't know. We'll have
Oh,
to ask her.
yeah, we'll have to ask
But
her.
yeah, it is a great term.
It is a
And
great
I
term.
think it captures a lot about how those so-called mediation sessions often work.
Yeah, and I just love that. I that's what it feels like exactly.
Yeah.
But we talked about like who collaborative divorce is a good fit for, and you touched upon, well, it may not be a process for everyone. So can you speak
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah. Uh, Let me back up a little bit to
Yeah.
say that you don't have to have an easy situation for collaborative to work. I think
Hmm.
sometimes there's a misapprehension out there, which is that collaborative is for when it's easy, and it's just not that, there's not much conflict, it's not that complicated. And I think it's the opposite, really, that it is for folks who have a lot of questions. Their situations are complicated, which is
Yeah.
exactly why they need robust professional support. If it were easy, they can do it on their own.
So
You
true.
know, they don't
Yeah.
need us. But if it's complicated, they do. We have a lot that we can offer to help people get through it smoothly. So what it does require is a real commitment to working together, and to showing up and participating. People who are in a collaborative divorce process don't get to hide behind their attorneys. They can't say, you go deal with it, get me as much as you can. They need to show up and participate in the conversations, and do some really hard work. So if people aren't up for that, then it's not a good process for them. If they really feel that the only way they can express themselves if their attorney does all the talking for them, it might not be the best place for them.
Okay.
Um, and the other folks for whom it's a not such a good fit is people who just don't have the capacity to empathize with a spouse, for whatever reason, whether it's a history of trauma, or if there's been DV in the relationship, if for whatever reason,
Personality
some people
disorder.
just don't have the
Yeah.
ability or the interest in trying to put themselves in the shoes of the other. And if that's the case, it's also not a great fit.
Yeah.
Um,
So
for
let's talk about,
everybody else,
okay.
if they've
Yeah.
got the both the capacity and the desire to do the work, I think it can work even when it's very, very complicated. And again, that's where a good professional team comes in.
Yeah, and just in terms of it complicated, like I've heard some really great stories from divorce coaches as well about when someone is struggling with substance abuse issues, let's just say alcohol,
Yeah,
using that collaborative divorce process is a really good container or piece to help
yeah,
people create a parenting plan, taking
yeah.
alcohol addictions into concerns.
Right. I love that you use that example, because I think that's
Yeah.
another one that people are really think wouldn't be a good fit for collaborative. If you've got mental health or substance abuse issues.
Yeah, mental health.
But again, I think it's just the contrary, that
Yeah.
if you have somebody who has an addiction issue, but who, is willing to show up and address it in a realistic way,
Mm.
then it's a great process, because it's out of that adversarial mode. Whereas in court, if somebody has an addiction issue and the other spouse is concerned about the kid's safety, for example,
Right.
then you might see a whole bunch of court filings that talk about the addiction issue,
Yeah.
which are going to inevitably make the person who has that particular issue feel defensive and
Mhm.
attacked, and all kinds of other things, right? If they're already dealing with their own struggles and trying to maintain some connection to their kids. But, it gets really complicated, and the legal adversarial system isn't designed to just provide support and safety um, for that particular person who's struggling with the addiction. In collaborative, we can look at both sides of it. We can look at the person who's struggling and the particular challenges that that person is facing and provide support, and at the same time provide a safety plan for the kids. And so I've had some cases where we have very real active addiction issues
Okay.
where the family has been able to work really well in collaborative. The kids end up safe. They end up maintaining contact with both parents as appropriate, as much as possible. And the other parent isn't frightened about what's going to happen because, again, we've got a good safety plan in place. So
Mm,
that requires creativity, and it requires um, both spouses to really show up for some difficult conversations, but it can be done. And I've had some great successes in cases that we've had because we've had a good team that's been able to um, really work with them to meet all of these really, really difficult challenges that they're facing.
yes. And I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned this a couple of times about showing up. So can you speak to, I guess, what is what is the client's role in the collaborative divorce process? What does showing up mean?
Showing up means having difficult conversations, initially with one's attorney, because we always do one-on-one preparation for the process. It requires a certain amount of vulnerability, and willingness to accept professional guidance. Um, that's an important piece. The folks who show up and they think they already have all the answers sometimes also are pretty rigid,
Okay.
and that makes it harder to be collaborative and creative. So it requires some flexibility
Uh,
um, and a willingness to have hard conversations. So after the one-on-one conversations with an attorney, there are other conversations that happen with the coach, which might be both spouses or partners with the coach. It might be both of them with the financial person. And then they'll come back into a space with everybody on the whole team. So um, I think of it as very much like a business meeting in the
hmm,
sense that you've got a group of people trying to solve a problem
oh,
together. But for that to work well, everybody needs to participate. So if somebody just doesn't want to participate, doesn't want to have these conversations, then it doesn't work well. So that's the work that a client needs to do is be prepared, do your homework, and be willing to have difficult conversations.
and when you say do your homework, can you speak to what that is?
Sure. Some of it is financial homework.
Oh,
You got to get the documents, all of the financial information out. And sometimes that's a certain amount of work to pass on all of that information in document form to the financial professional. Um, and then there's also the emotional piece. There's hard work sometimes around doing a deeper dive into um, those tender areas that everybody has when going through a divorce, and really trying to understand them so that they can be addressed. If folks come in fully defended, like, you know, I
hmm,
didn't do anything wrong and I'm
right.
not participating with this, sometimes that's an easier place for people to be, right? Because then you can like
Yeah.
end of conversation, I'm done.
Yeah.
So the hard work is in letting down those barriers and those defenses
The
enough
walls.
to let in new
Yeah.
information and create flexibility and a capacity for creativity in oneself. So some of it is just introspection work, which can be done with the coach, with the attorney one-on-one, on one's own, um, with the whole team. But it can be hard.
Yeah.
And so I consider that work that the client needs to do.
Yeah, and it is because you touched upon it earlier, because in a traditional divorce litigation, you mentioned that the client, they can just, they're showing, the attorney shows up, not
Right,
the client.
right.
And the client can, in a way, use that attorney as their shield,
That's
whether
right.
to attack the other person,
Right.
or just not just you don't have to participate
That's
in that
right.
collaborative, flexible. You don't have to make yourself open. You don't have to have introspection into your own behaviors. Divorce litigation, like you said, it's adversarial. It's pointing
Right.
the finger at the other side.
That's right. There's a lot of that. Now, a lot of more traditional family law attorneys also are very creative,
Yeah.
and they do great work with their clients to help them understand the context and make appropriate compromises. So it's not like we in Collaborative have a monopoly on guiding
Right.
clients through divorce that's difficult without it getting crazy adversarial. That's not the case at all. But we do it differently in Collaborative, with a different emphasis that that does that doesn't and enable. Let me start that sentence again. That doesn't enable a client to say to an attorney, "Just tell me what to do."
Oh, yeah, that's a good piece.
Right? So because we can't. We don't have all the answers. We don't know exactly what would happen at trial. So we can't say, this is what you must do. This is what would be ordered. And generally, our practice in Collaborative is to not take that invitation. So if a client says to me, just tell me what to do, I'm not going to give a straight answer, because I want the client to remain open and flexible, and create space for real discussions. And every decision has to be made with both parties. I can't tell a client where to land. The client then turns around and says, well, this is what my attorney told me to do, and I'm not going to flex on this point, and collaboration is over.
Yeah.
So that is a big difference in how it unfolds. And if somebody just wants to be told what to do and sticks to that desire, because a lot of people at various times want to just be told what to do, right? It's just
Yeah,
easier.
it is.
But if they really are not open to um, exploring options deeply and owning the decision themselves, then Collaborative is going to be tough.
Okay. Fascinating. I really like how you explain that. And in my head, I'm just thinking in terms of collaborative divorce, as a client, you have to be prepared to like roll up your sleeves and be
Yeah,
present and get down into it, even as
right,
uncomfortable as it is, know that there's a team, your divorce coach, uh,
right.
maybe a parenting coach if kids are involved, the collaborative divorce attorneys, they're all there to support you.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's important for all of us to understand the discomfort. This is hard. This is somebody they're divorcing or separating from, and they're scared usually about their financial well-being, about where they're going to live, what life is going to look like, how's this going to affect their kids. There's a lot of fear, and just tumult. Their worlds are being turned upside down, and whether they ask for the divorce or not. And so we all need to be really sensitive to and educated about what that emotional experience is like for folks, so that we can help support them through it. And the answer is not to take over and say, okay, I'll just tell you what to do. The answer is to provide deeper emotional support and really understand what is feeling threatened, why somebody feels fearful, and bring those things to the surface so that they can be addressed.
Right. And I want to talk about, and you, as you being part of the King County Collaborative Law Program, KCCL,
Mhm.
can you talk about the Access to Collaborative
Sure.
program that you helped develop? What is that?
Yeah. Yes, I'd be delighted to. We have developed a program that is a sliding fee scale program. We would like collaborative to be available to more people. It is expensive because all legal services are expensive. It's not more expensive than litigation. In fact, I think it's a lot less expensive than real litigation.
Yeah.
And still, you've got 4 professionals on your team who are being paid at pretty high hourly rates. So the sliding fee scale program through King County Collaborative Law is intended to enable people to have a complete team of professionals and get all of the professional services that they need to deal with their complicated situations and not have to pay so much. So it sets hourly rates based on income levels of the clients. So, for example, we have reduced hourly rates that the whole professional team would commit to for clients earning up to a total of $125,000 a year. So folks whose joint income is less than that might be eligible to receive these reduced rates from their professional team. There are some additional qualifications. Uh, 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 there's an asset limit with a whole bunch of things excluded. So, for example, your house is excluded, your retirement accounts are excluded, your cars are excluded. But if after those exclusions you still have a lot of money in the bank, you might not qualify. Right now, the liquid assets cap is about $30,000.
Hmm.
That might shift depending on how it goes as people come into the program and we get more information about where the needs are. Because the bottom line is that we would like to serve people as much as we possibly can. So if folks are lower income and they don't have much in the way of available assets,
Hmm.
then they might qualify and they can reach us through the King County Collaborative Law website
Okay.
where people can fill out an initial eligibility questionnaire. And then if it looks like there's a fit, we refer them to members in our community who are willing to work at these reduced rates for further um, discussion about whether this is a good match.
Well, that's exciting. That's exciting to be able to make collaborative law affordable to everyone.
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
with
And I
with
think
those
it really should
policies.
take in just about everyone because our fee scale goes pretty low. Um, and of course, if people don't have complexity, then they might not need a full team, and that also further reduces the um, the cost, or they might still be able to do it on their own or choose a different process. But again, for people for whom there are a lot of moving parts and it's hard, and maybe it's that couple where there's an addiction issue, and they really do need some robust support to figure out how to manage it. Um, then it might be a really good option.
Okay, so to recap then, if myself and my spouse made under 124,000, and let's just say we had a home, we
Mhm.
had retirement accounts, we each had a retirement account, no other liquid assets beyond that, we would be eligible for this program?
Right?
Okay, but do we have to live in King County, or could people outside of King County
No,
qualify?
it can be outside.
Okay,
It is a
okay,
program of King County Collaborative Law. Um, uh, so most of the professionals who would be working on the program are probably located in King County, but not entirely. I'm working on a case right now where we have some folks from outside the county on the professional team, but we all agreed to follow the King County Collaborative Law protocols regarding what rate we're charging. And on that case, we're all at $170 per hour, which is a pretty deep discount
oh,
from
that's
what
so,
people are usually paying.
yeah, that is
And
a
it's
deep
working.
discount.
It's good. So many of us are working on Zoom. We can reach people, really all over the state.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of availability there for people who are interested.
And you kind of touched upon it too, where it may seem like it may seem like when you have this team of professionals, that collaborative law can be daunting financially, but as a reformed divorce litigator that myself that is coming out of
Yeah.
divorce litigation, let me tell you this. Ever since the pandemic, the cost of divorce litigation has skyrocketed. Where now I can see, well, yes, because I did do a collaborative divorce case and that got resolved so efficiently and
Mm.
cheaply than my traditional divorce litigation. And earlier that was a flip. Collaborative divorce was more, but now it's not. It's actually cheaper, folks. It's cheaper than litigation and going to court and
In-
fighting.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is data out there that shows that collaborative really is cheaper.
it is now.
Of course, the range of litigation cases that are in that data set include ones that went all the way to trial, which is a wholly different
Oh
beast.
gosh, that's a beast.
Those are six-figure
Six figures.
professional fees, whereas that never happens in collaborative, as far as I know. Um, but even if a case is in a more traditional process and it begins with some motions early on, I used to think every motion is going to be a $5,000 per attorney kind of project.
Oh, it's
Uh,
more.
eh,
It's actually the motions actually are now minimum cost $7,500 to $10,000 because I'm talking about those complicated motions
right.
where we're dealing with kids, so
Yeah,
parenting plans, spousal support, child support. It's
right.
$10,000. That's
Right.
expensive,
It's per
right?
side.
Per side.
Yeah. So that's a chunk of change.
That's a chunk.
Whereas we have collaborative cases that can almost be done for that much.
Yeah.
Now, some are more, so I don't want
Right.
to make false representations, but I have had collaborative cases where my total fees are less than that.
Yeah.
And others where they're twice that, or maybe three times that, but it doesn't get much higher than that for me. And so it 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 really is. I guess I would say it's a more efficient process.
Yes.
Uh, Sometimes when we're sitting in 2-hour meetings and there are four professionals on the clock, which is really a 3-hour block for the professionals because of some preparation before the meeting and then a debrief afterwards, clients do get really itchy, like, oh my gosh, how many dollars per minute is this meeting? So that's expensive and that's hard to absorb. But what is not happening is all of the individual prep time that an attorney does in an adversarial
Right.
process, where the attorney is gathering and reviewing all of the financial information, making her own spreadsheets, preparing her motion, writing declarations, showing up in court. That's enormously time consuming, and that's stuff that clients don't often see. We don't do any of that in
Yeah.
collaborative.
Yeah.
The attorneys don't have to do that same sort of intensive review of all of the documents because we know that our financial professional is gathering that information and preparing a really good financial report that we can rely on. I might look at it, check something in the documents. I certainly need to spend time understanding those numbers, but I don't have to gather them, verify them, put them all together myself. And the counterpart attorney on the case also isn't doing that. So you've got one really highly trained professional
Mhm.
who's doing it efficiently, and we're not duplicating efforts. And that's a huge cost savings.
That's you're talking about the financial neutral, and that's huge because what you're talking about is a financial discovery aspect in traditional litigation divorce,
Right.
which can cost each side $10,000 a piece,
Yeah.
especially when there's a lot of financial information involved.
Right. And
And
we don't
that
have to
is
do it.
daunting. Yeah, I don't have to do
Right.
that.
And this
Just-
is where we rely on the clients, right? This is where the homework is involved.
Right.
They've got to gather those documents, but they would in a discovery process
Would.
anyway. They still have to gather the documents. What's not happening is that an attorney is not spending time making those particular document requests, and running doing all the paperwork involved to force somebody to deliver those documents. It just happens, right? People work together, they get their bank statements, they transfer them to the financial person, and there's very little cost involved in that piece of the process.
Yeah, that's the aspect I love about collaborative divorce the most, about how streamlined that financial process and how cost effective it is.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a huge advantage to the process. It really is.
Switching gears, because I know you also do you're also a mediator as well.
Correct.
Yeah, what type of, I know there's different types of mediation.
Mhm.
What, like there's facilitative mediation, there's the interest-based mediation, and Jacinta's program, the insight
Right.
mediation. So what do you do for, how do you work, or what model do you use as a mediator?
So I'm moving more and more into the insight model
Okay.
because I think it's just so good. And
And why
uh,
is that? Can you speak to that?
so in the insight approach to mediation grew out of learning theory. So it was developed early by philosophers at universities who were investigating what happens to people in conflict, and how do conflict behaviors um, uh, express themselves, and how are they generated, what's happening to people when they're in conflict. And one of the great insights of the insight approach is that when people are in conflict, their brains have shut down. They
Yeah.
can't be creative anymore, and they can't take in and learn new information. So understanding why people shut down is super important. And sort of
Yeah.
taking that apart a little bit, when people feel threatened, when something that is important to them, that they care deeply about, feels threatened,
Yeah.
whether they recognize exactly what it is that's happening or not, they will defend against that threat. Often the threat is based on a misperception. It might be that somebody doesn't mean to threaten them in any
Yeah.
particular way, but there's something that another person is doing or saying that triggers that defensive response. So if we can understand what it is that they deeply care about that is being threatened in that situation, what is their perception of threat about? Then we can start to diffuse it a little bit. We can start to help people feel heard. We can help them clear up any misunderstanding that might be triggering that defensive response. And that often happens with the two people in the room, right? If spouse A gets really triggered by something spouse B says,
Yeah.
let's understand why that is, and verify with spouse B, is that what was intended? Because sometimes it wasn't. And
Yeah.
so helping folks understand their communication patterns better and understand what exactly is feeling threatened and why can help them walk through it and get to a place where those misunderstandings are cleared up, or real differences in their concerns and needs can be addressed directly and creatively, so that they don't need to be defending against the other, and they don't need to be in the same kind of conflict. So if that conflict can be reduced through that kind of a process, then people can show up with some ability to learn and be creative and come up with real solutions. So really, insight mediation is trying to get to the core of the conflict, um, in a way that enables people to find a different and better way to move forward.
I like how you describe that insight mediation is helping people get to the core of the conflict, as contrasted with interest-based mediation. Well, what is your interest here? Is your
Right.
interest here financial security?
Yeah. Yeah. The difference is the emotional piece.
Hmm.
Because on one level, we can identify those interests, which can be, objectively very clear,
Yeah.
and we can figure out ways to meet both of those interests if everybody is able to think really rationally. But a lot of conflict happens in such a way that people can't think rationally anymore because of what's happening to them
Right.
physiologically, because of the underlying conflict and all of the emotion that is there, which has to do with those very core values, those concerns and needs that are being threatened. So if you if you embrace more fully what is happening for people in conflict, then you can get at it in a way that is a bit deeper, and ultimately I think is more flexible. It's a more expansive approach, can deal with other kinds of issues um, in a productive, helpful way to help people get to durable agreements. So, sorry, that was a mouthful.
No, I was just, it's so funny because you're talking about this and I was thinking, I was thinking about an argument I had with my husband this very morning, and just what you're talking about, like, oh my gosh, I wish we had an insight mediator between the two of us,
Right.
because I was I was feeling threatened, and I just went into like defend and attack mode, and no, but literally my brain just shut down.
That's
And
what
now
happens.
that my brain just
Right.
shut down, went into attack defense mode. And of course, what happens is that then we're both yelling and not really hearing each other.
Right.
And when, listening to you talk, well, what's behind it, right? And I
Mhm.
can analyze it like, okay, his has to do with financial security, and mine has to do with I want financial independence. So those are the two different
Mhm.
values
Right.
that that we're in
Perfect.
conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you're probably able to analyze it later, but not very well in the moment.
In the moment.
And
Not
and
because
that's
I
what
was
happens to all
flooded.
of us. I mean, it's amazing how this training, as I mentioned, I've been doing training for years, right? Trying to
Yeah.
more deeply understand and improve my own skills for meeting people in these places. Um, but oh my goodness, it makes me think retrospectively about so many things I've done in my life and conflicts
Yeah.
I've had and the ways I've parented and all of it. Oh my gosh, I want to have a redo for all of it. Or fortunately not all of it, but some of it for
Yeah.
sure. Because there's just so much that I've learned, and I'm so grateful for my trainers over the years, and my colleagues and my clients who've helped me learn so much over the years. But anyway, I try to bring all of that to mediation, and I'm still working on, and I probably will be working forever on the insight approach and all of the richness that I think it brings to the mediation process.
So how do you help clients as a mediator? How do you help your clients prepare for mediation?
So thanks to Jacinta Gallant and the work that she has done in bringing insight mediation to our community, uh, I've got a wonderful set of workbooks which she wrote that enable clients to do a lot of their homework on their own, a lot of the introspection about what is really important to them, and it also provides information that people can use in discussions with their spouses. But primarily, it's about the introspection piece, enabling people then to show up and and identify what's happening in those moments of conflict. Oh, right, that's because this is super important to me. I really value um, X and my partner is really valuing Y, and that's why we're not hearing each other. It's helping people bring those things to the surface. And a good mediator is there to help that happen. But a lot of the preparation can be done by clients on their own time, thanks to this really great set of workbooks that Jacinta has produced.
And so before you were trained to be an insight mediator, and when did you receive that training again with Jacinta?
I started with her in 2019. She appeared at the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals annual forum, which was in Seattle in
Okay.
2018. And then she did a Zoom training group in 2019. It was my first time on Zoom before the pandemic.
Oh,
But
wow.
it was a wonderful experience because we had people from around the world who were in that training group. So I did that one, and then I did uh 2 years ago, I guess now, a year-long series with her in insight mediation, and I'm in another one right now. So it's an ongoing thing.
Wow, you have gotten a lot of training because you just completed the year-long training with International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, right? IACP.
Yeah, that
Wow.
was a leadership academy.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was, yes, a different sort of training, and that was another year-long program.
I love
Mhm.
that. Because I think especially too, as attorneys, lawyers, we always need to be developing and growing our skills to truly be able to help our clients.
I agree.
So so with you, you know, kind of, I guess, playing that role as a traditional mediator, let's just say interspace, and then insight, now doing the insight training and doing mediation that way. Can you speak as to as to the two differences that you've seen in terms of your mediation practice when you were doing interspace as to now, which is more insight based?
I think it's just deeper.
Oh, okay.
And it's given me a richer um theory to draw on, so that I can understand what needs to happen next, and I actually have some real approaches. um I think that, not articulating this very well, but I think it's just richer.
Mhm.
And it because it's tied so much to human behavior rather than simply to, what people already know they need. um, it's more flexible and responsive to real conflict, I think.
Ah, okay.
um,
Okay. That
and
makes sense.
so for me, whether I'm using it in a mediation or I'm bringing those same um, insights to bear in a collaborative case, it has helped me shift the kinds of questions I ask, and what I expect to happen. So
Hmm.
it's helped me become, I think, very tolerant of conflict. I'm not uncomfortable uh, being in conflict, um, and has helped me intervene, I think, um, more effectively for my clients, helping them feel heard and understood.
Yeah.
And um, so that's what has made it, I think, most meaningful for me. And I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, I think there's so much more to learn, and I have a lot of room for improvement in my own skills as an insight mediator. I think I can make this my lifelong project now that I am in the last act. um I've just got there's just so much there.
Yeah.
I want to delve deeper and become better at it.
And then you're going to be giving classes and training on insight mediation.
Well, that would be great. I would love to. Yeah, I don't feel, um, yeah, yes, I would love to.
Um, but I heard you mention, I wanted to go back there. You talked about real approaches. Is that something you could get an example of or speak more to?
What did I say? Real approaches?
Real approaches, right? And this is what I thought of. This is what came to my mind. And I think maybe we touched upon this when we were in our training with Jacinta. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's pretend, right? So
Okay.
we're in a collaborative divorce meeting, or we were in mediation. And I'm the woman,
Uh,
which I am. But so you see me, and my husband is talking about money and finances, whatever, and I'm sitting
yeah,
like this. I'm sitting like this. My arms are
yeah,
crossed,
yeah,
sign, I'm rolling my eyes.
yeah.
What's a real approach that you would do? Do you see my body language?
I'd start by noticing it out
Yeah.
loud in the meeting.
Go ahead. Let's pretend. Let's.
Yeah, I'd say, Lonnie, I noticed that you've just moved back from the screen and you're not saying much, and I'm curious what's going on for you in this moment.
Okay. So we're role playing right now, everybody. My arms across. I'm leaning back in my chair. I'm actually looking up at the ceiling right now. Gwen just asked me this question. I don't know. I don't know, Gwen.
So Lani, you're not sure what's happening, but I'm going to imagine that something that has been said has made you feel like you can't really respond. Is that right?
I'm making her work for this, folks.
Yeah, you are.
I'm making her work. I gave that tough thing. I don't know. Well, yeah, Gwen, I just feel really frustrated. I just feel really frustrated and upset right now by what he said.
So you're frustrated because he has said, and let's make something up more specific, right? So what has he said that frustrated you? We're sort of stepping out of the role for
Yeah.
this moment.
Well, and then plus, and then also too, Gwen has to make me work too. Gwen has to help me define what it is that makes me feel
Right,
frustrated. So I love
right.
that you asked that, Gwen, because now I have to think about it, right? I'm not making you do the work for me.
So let's go
Well,
back into role. So I
okay.
could say in that moment, can
Mhm.
can you be more specific? What is it that's frustrating
Yeah.
you?
Well, I feel frustrated because it just kind of always seemed like money was always this big thing for him. Whereas I know that together our incomes we make under together our combined incomes are let's just say 200,000, okay? But he makes me feel the way he's talking about it like we make $60,000 and we can't support two households. Like, doesn't he understand I'm frugal too? I'm trying to, I feel like I'm getting attacked. Like he doesn't feel like I can't come up with a budget. Like I'm trying to live beyond our means. And that's what's really frustrating. I feel like I'm not getting the respect. I'm not getting the respect and the recognition that I'm financially savvy or I'm financially responsible as well. That's what really frustrates me.
So you're feeling that you have the ability to work within your available resources,
Yeah.
but that ability is not being respected. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So that's why that's why I'm here, husband. Like, can you understand that? I understand, but I do think that if we come up together with a budget, we can work to figure out how to make sure there's enough for us both post-divorce.
So I want to turn now to your spouse and ask, is that what you intended to communicate to Lani? And so then this is
Yeah,
where
the
he
spouse.
might then respond and say, no, I don't mean that at all.
Yeah,
I'm just freaked out about X, Y, or Z. Um, and then we would take it. But the innovation in insight mediation is that when you're talking, I'm going to be watching him to see how it's landing on him, and then ask him to engage and to verify his own intention. He has said something that upset you. And so first thing we want to understand is, did he mean to say what upset you,
yeah,
right? Did he mean to imply that you're, reckless with money and have no ability
yeah, yeah,
to function with a budget? Because that's triggered you.
yeah.
You have some value around your competence
Mm,
as a person who's managing money, and you felt that was challenged and
right.
was threatened. So my engagement with you is to understand the threat that you feel, and then to check out with him, is that what he meant? Did he mean to threaten you in that way?
Mm,
And it might be, no, that's not it at all. But he's really frightened about something a little bit different.
yeah. And I, as a client, when I was when I was role playing, it does feel really good to have you take that moment and to kind of ask that why, to be curious as a mediator, even as a profession, be like, well, why? Why? Because then I have to think for myself and I really have to go in deep into what are my values and my beliefs that I then feel threatened. So
Right.
it feels good for me to have you be curious and then restate what you heard me say.
Great. And
Yeah,
that's the point, right? Is
yeah.
to help people feel heard, feel understood, which enables them to relax.
And I did.
So if I had turned to you at that moment and said instead,
Mhm.
um, oh, that's not what he means, and or I had said to you, you know, actually, I know you can do it. If I'd said something like that to try to reassure you, it how would that have felt?
Not good. Because I'm
Right.
still frustrated and upset because now
Right.
you're telling me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because of something he said, right? So my intervention that's intended to calm you down or
Right.
tell you that you're going to be okay, or to tell him, oh, actually, you have $200,000. That's plenty. That's not
Right.
going to calm him. So my echoing the position of either of you isn't
Right.
going to help this conflict at all. It's between the two of you and the ways in which you feel threatened by your circumstances or by one another, and then trying to understand the nature of that threat, um, bring it to the surface, and check it out,
Yeah.
and enable you then to feel calmed simply because you've been heard and understood, enable you to learn something new from him and vice versa, that might then enable you to start getting creative about problem solving.
Yeah. I could feel that. I felt my brain shift out of defensive mode when you're asking these questions, and I actually felt my body relax as well.
Great. That's
So I
that's
love
the
that.
that's the intention, right? So the learning for me as a mediator is
Yeah.
learning how I can most facilitate that kind of response, which enables people to relax and to learn and to come back into creativity.
And I think what people need to, I think what's also good to point out too, Gwen, is this not only works in terms of being a mediator, but this also is part of the process of the client showing up in a collaborative divorce and kind of being
Right,
open in that type of a sense. Like I'm in my
right.
head, I was kind of thinking if you were my collaborative divorce attorney and we were in a meeting with a club with a team, that's also
Hmm.
something that can happen as well, where I could feel myself shutting down and then you help draw me out,
Right.
which it's not the same thing that happens in a traditional litigation divorce.
No, it's not. It's not. It is pretty
And that,
different in that way.
right. And that's why like if my the values aren't addressed and I'm just wound up throughout the whole process.
Right, right. And I
Yeah.
think that's often what happens for folks.
Um, well, thank you so much, Gwen, for being on and talking about the collaborative divorce process and how a client can show up. Talking about the access to collaborative program that you help develop that can make collaborative law more affordable for people here in the state of Washington, and also talking about insight mediation and what does that mean. Um, truly appreciated your insight.
Thank you so much for doing this and having me here to have this chat. I really do appreciate it.
And how can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you as a collaborative divorce attorney or as a mediator?
So Gwen at mathewsonlaw.com, mathewsonlaw.com. I am going to be beginning a little bit of a sabbatical in the next few months, so I'm not going to be available to take new clients until probably early in the fall. But if for folks who are looking for good collaborative attorneys, start at King County Collaborative Law website or Collaborative Professionals of Washington website. And start having conversations with folks that you find there. I'm also happy to refer people in the short term to other attorneys, but there are lots of good folks out there, yourself included. And so I encourage people
Thank
to
you.
reach out to you and find their way into collaborative practice that way.
Thank you, Gwen. And what's before we sign off, what's a fun fact about you that somebody wouldn't know just from looking at you? Secret superpower or skill?
Well, gosh, I don't know. I spend, I'm working totally from home in part because I split my time between Jefferson and Jefferson County and King County. So I guess a fun fact is that I spend a fair amount of time on the road. But I guess that's not that much fun, actually.
Let me ask you this then.
Yeah,
When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
a veterinarian,
Oh my gosh. Really?
really.
So what switched you on the path to law then? That's amazing.
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder that, but somehow it's worked out well.
Oh gosh. And yeah, and Gwen has a beautiful is your dog around?
He's not. I'm
Gosh.
upstairs in my attic
Okay.
home office, and the stairs are too steep, so he doesn't like coming up. But I have a
Oh,
collie, and yeah, he's tons of fun. He's my best companion.
long-haired collie too. So how often are you
Yeah.
grooming your dog?
Not as much as you might think.
Oh, okay.
His coat
Okay.
looks pretty good, but yeah, he's a Lassie lookalike.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I loved Lassies until I realized I'm like, I don't want to do that work of grooming. I'm sorry. I've I've got I've got my dog Chewbacca over here, who's a poodle slash cocker spaniel, no shedding, love it.
There you go.
Low
Yeah,
maintenance.
he does shed. It's true. So
Well, thank you so much, Gwen, for
thank
coming on
you.
again. And everyone, when we have this podcast up, you'll be able to, we'll have Gwen's information as well in the link. And until then, and oh, I guess a little preview. I didn't tell you this, Gwen, but yes, Jacinta is going to be on the podcast as well, talking about insight mediation.
Fantastic. So she'll do
Yeah.
a much better explanation than I just did. So people should listen to both.
Yeah, so tune in, folks, for another episode of the Akiona Law Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything that intersects in the areas of family law and divorce. Until then, be well.
The information in this podcast is general advice only and should not in any respect be relied on as specific legal advice.